What's up, everyone? Welcome back to a brand new video. I'm your host, David Setti, and today we're going to get into a quick response of mine for this video that is going around witchcraft, African spirituality, and the church. And it's from us from our sister, Jackie Hill Perry. Now, she's going viral a few times because of she's expressed her Christian beliefs, specifically when it comes to Beyonce's music. Now, I will say this. I'm not getting on here and trying to disrespect her or talk about her personally. I do not know her personally. And as a Black man, I do not believe in getting online and simply trashing our people simply because I may have a difference in belief. I think we have to understand this too. Those of us that are part of quote unquote African spirituality, and those of us, our brothers and sisters and cousins on the continent that do subscribe to Christianity, I think we can both agree on is that we do live in a very real spiritual universe, and that there are spiritual realities that may not always have our best interests at heart. With that being said, one of the things I do want to touch on is one thing I do not like is disrespecting our ancestors. Yes, a lot of us have adopted Christianity as a religion, as a way of life, etc. But when it comes to knocking what our ancestors did, because we don't understand what they did, therefore we write it off as witchcraft, demonic things, we have to be very careful with that. Because if it wasn't for them, if it wasn't for the strength they had I really don't even want to say faith, because faith is I don't like applying it to our ways of life if I'm being 100% myself. But we have to be very careful with that, because if it wasn't for them and the strength that they had with holding on to our traditions, holding on to our ancestral ways, yes, a lot of that may be divorced from a lot of us in the diaspora, particularly as myself, as an African American man. I do subscribe to quote unquote African spirituality. I'm going to let you know that, guys, know that now. I am part of the Kemetic tradition, which is a reconstruction tradition where we reconstruct the ancient African Nile Valley spiritual system. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to play the video. It's real quick, and then I'm going to give my response to it. Now, in my response, if it sounds like I'm reading from a script, it's actually because I had to write my thoughts down, because I did not want to get on here and just start going off the top of my head. So let's get into the video.
I don't know who told us you got to be a witch to be Black. You are not more Black by engaging in witchcraft that is still propagating a white supremacist lie that Black people in Africa didn't know Jesus. I am angry that the powers that be in social media and in culture and in music and in Beyonce's music and in Kalani's music and in whatever the other, and in Santa, like, I'm angry that they are really trying to convince us that all spiritualism is the same. And we have digested this impurity and this, we want so bad not to be legalistic that we actually become profane. We want so bad to have all these freedoms that we are entertaining demons, and you wonder why you are depressed, and you wonder why you are anxious, and you wonder why you have nightmares, and you wonder why you can't sleep, and you wonder why you see things in your room at night. It's because you're opening up doors to all kinds of demons. Close them. Whatever you got in your home that's witchcraft, throw it away. Throw it away. Burn everything you got, because we are women who are going to love God with all of our heart and all of our mind and all of our soul. We are not going to imitate the detestable practices of the nations.
Okay, wow. So there was a lot to get into. So let's get into exactly what she was saying here. So let's see here. So first, let's talk about what she talked about witches and being Black. First of all, I want to say this. The word witch is used a little bit too loosely and is applied to many things within African spiritual systems that have nothing to do with witchcraft or magic. Traditionally, a quote-unquote witch meant something very specific in our mother cultures, and to be real, we're using a language where, when approaching our mother's ways of life from a Eurocentric worldview, does not hold the same connotation. Now, when I say our mother's ways of life, I'm speaking about our ancestral mothers and our ancestral fathers, but to be more specific, our ancestral mothers. The European that came to Africa and observed our ancestors' ways of life, from his perspective, what he was seeing our foremothers do was foreign and, quite honestly, illegal for his women to do. The fact that our mothers were allowed and did possess knowledge that, from his perspective, a woman should not possess, he labeled them witches and our healing modalities as magic. In the West, a witch is a term used as a catch-all, mainly for any woman or man that partakes in any traditional way of life that can include working magic. For example, in the United States of America, specifically in the South, African Americans traditionally have a magical system known as hoodoo, or it's more famously called hoodoo. The hoodoo woman or the root woman is not a witch, nor do we refer to such individuals in our community as witches. If I'm approaching the ways of life of our ancestors from a Eurocentric supremacist worldview, then technically everyone in that community that I'm seeing is a witch. What the European was viewing our mothers doing was, in reality, utilizing healing modalities from the earth to heal their communities. Anything even remotely, quote unquote, divine or miraculous happening to the benefit of people, if it wasn't through the agency of the Christian church, it was considered witchcraft. To be honest, a lot of the negative witchcraft that affected him, the European colonizer, amongst his own, was his own women that did work traditional forms of European magic to combat the tyranny of the church in Europe. Traditionally, magic can be used for both good and bad. Such is nature. The fire that can warm you on a cold winter's night and cook your food, the very same fire that burns your house down. Next, she gets on to what she refers to as a white European supremacist lie that Africans did not know Jesus in Africa. Recently, with the rise of a lot of Black peoples returning back to their ancestors' ways of life, the Black church has been pushing urban apologetics like never before to combat this. They talk about how Christianity is not a white man's religion. Now, honestly, Christianity did not technically come from white European people. A lot of Christianity did have its origins on the continent of Africa, mainly in Egypt. And one of the oldest, or two of the oldest forms of organized Christianity on Africa, on the African continent, is the Egyptian Coptic Church and the Ethiopian Orthodox Church. Now, that the Christianity that our ancestors, and when I say ours, I mean those of us in the diaspora, whose ancestors, majority of them, not all of them, came from West Africa. The Christianity they encountered was a Christianity very unique and specific to Europeans, mainly the Roman Catholic Church. When they presented us the image of Jesus Christ, it was not an African image. It was a European man. The ironic part is a lot of symbolism used in Christianity is not unique to Christianity. When our ancestors were brought to the islands, and from a historical standpoint, even those of us that reside in the United States today, when our ancestors were brought initially from the continent of Africa, they usually went through the islands before they even came to the United States. The dominant form of Christianity was Catholicism, not any early form of Christianity that might have developed in Egypt. We also have to understand this too. Our chiefs and our kings and our queen mothers accepting Christianity and Islam from a political point of view is not the same thing as truly embracing the religion at the expense of your ancestral ways. Case in point, the United States of America, the president of the United States of America, from a political standpoint, he has to make it known that he's a Christian, although he holds an office that does things around the world that is diametrically opposed to any message that the Christian Jesus taught. In reality, on the slave plantations in the southern United States, what I call plantation Christianity wasn't really Christianity at all. Protestant Christianity is the dominant form of Christianity amongst African Americans today in the States, but from a historical standpoint, is very recent in African American history. We have to understand this too. Our mother tongue was stripped from us. Black people, being the spiritual people that we are first and foremost, were very resourceful and sneaky on how they hid their ancestral ways. You might want to call on Olodumare, but when that overseer came around, he better hear the Lord. So if I erect a little shed or a little barn and place the word praise house over it, that's not a church. There was our ancestors' way of putting the dominant society's language to our ancestral things that did not have an origin in the life we were forced to live. This is where I think the idea of Christianity being a foundation to hoodoo comes from, although that is false. Next, she brings up Beyonce. Now, lover, hater, or if you're indifferent, we cannot deny Beyonce is one of the biggest stars on the planet right now. And she's also always at the tail end of quote unquote satanic Illuminati theories. I think this is because Beyonce embraces, or at least had to embrace, her blackness or learned to embrace her blackness in a way that is more in your face, especially because she exists in an industry where, for the most part, you have to be a blank slate. You have to be something for everyone in the world. That's how you cross over and become that megastar. Take, for instance, one of our greats, Erykah Badu. She ain't selling out concert stadiums like Beyonce is. And now there are those people around the world that do love Erykah Badu. She came out the gate with a very specific look and sound. Beyonce has utilized symbolism and works of art that are rooted in our and hers ancestral background. This presents a problem, though, because Black women traditionally is what keeps the Black church running. Black men can lead the church in masses, but it doesn't hold the same weight if the Black woman left the Christian church in mass. She talks about how Beyonce and other, Kalani, I believe that's what she said, but Beyonce is making all spirituality and spiritualism, as she said, the same. What I find ironic how she just used the word witch as a blanket term for all spiritual practices. Beyonce, in my humble opinion, poses a problem because she's too influential. The ancestors sometimes have a very odd way of calling their children home. Take, for instance, her Black is King video. A young Black man or a young Black woman could be feeling something ancestrally calling to them, but can't put their finger on it because they don't exist in their ancestors' culture. So they happen to watch the video, see some symbolism that triggers something in their subconscious mind or collective unconscious mind, ancestral unconscious mind. She or he looks into it and their ancestors say, that's us. In reality, that's the problem Beyonce poses. Notice how they never really talk about the city girls, for example, or call out these Black men rapping these destructive lyrics. They never really call it out on a mass level. Why is it always Beyonce? Now, I will say this, some words of wisdom. If you feel your ancestors are calling to you, not all African spiritual systems are the same. You may see similarities, but that doesn't mean they are the same. For instance, African American hoodoo is not European witchcraft. In my tradition, the Kemetic tradition, our goddess Hathor or Heru is very similar to the Orisha Oshun, but they aren't the same. Ironically, Beyonce has paid homage to both African goddesses in her work. Now, onto this demon thing. She said something that actually does make sense to me, something that I do sort of agree with. She said that we want so bad to have these freedoms that we end up entertaining demons. And that if you have these things in your house, you told the congregation, go home, burn them. Now, what these people may have in their house that they need to go home and burn, I don't know. And if my humble opinion, if you do have some stuff in your house that, you know, sometimes just burning it ain't going to take it away. But that's a whole nother story. Whole nother story. Because traditional African spiritual systems have become more mainstream in recent years and decades, there's a misconception that African spiritual systems is simply magic. That if my life is going through a stroke of bad luck, I can turn to these systems because I myself am an African person of descent, and all I have to do is do a little dance, light a little candle, burn some little incense, and the ancestors and these gods are going to magically change my life for the better. Herein lies the problem with that thinking. African spiritual systems are not something that you practice. It is something that you live. When I say practice, I mean I can do this African stuff on Sunday and then expect the magical results on Monday. Our ancestors' ways of life was never like that. And because we come from these people, in my humble opinion, it is not going to work for us like that. One of the main reasons people run into, like she said, the psychosis, hearing voices, depression, all this type of stuff, is because usually these people are probably mixing things that should not be mixed. Because African spirituality is approached, unfortunately, as just simply magic from a Western point of view. These people are probably doing things they technically have no business doing because they aren't initiated in these systems to understand what they are doing. I can have the greatest intention on wanting to cook a good meal, but if I get in that kitchen and start just throwing shit together because I'm hungry or I'm trying to impress some guests and I do not know what I'm doing, I'm going to end up usually doing something that tastes off or it's going to be downright nasty. If I go into the kitchen because I'm hungry, turn the stove on, and then I go lay down and I fall asleep, and then the next thing I know, I'm waking up to the sound of a fire alarm and my kitchen is on fire, I can't blame the food, the pot, or the stove. It's my fault. Many of us are desperate for our lives to change, and desperate people do what, y'all? Desperate things. If I read a book and see that issue, quote unquote, opens doors, and I'm seeing that from my spiritual Instagram celebrity, my favorite spiritual Instagram celebrity, that they have this nice little setup with this issue head. So then I go decide to do the same thing. I go buy an issue head, bring it in my home, give it an offering. If I'm extra desperate, some blood from a chicken or something. And because I read this book, that Ishu, Ilegwa, and Papa Legba and Anubis are the same, I start shaking my maraca and calling on Papa Legba and Ishu to open up the doors for me. Now, all of a sudden, my life starts getting worse. And on top of that, I begin hearing voices in the house. We have to understand this. Now, from a comedic point of view, it takes a lot to get a guy's attention. But in the spirit world, there are spirits that are looking for a way in, looking for substance. They read that, first of all, you don't know what you're doing. And then they sense that you're not confident. To be quite honest, 85% of us, and I'll use that, 85% of us don't really know what a god or a goddess showing up really looks like. So we have no knowledge or frame of reference to say that's not them. Many of us cannot even sit in a dark room by ourselves for an hour and face our own thoughts, let alone recognize a presence of a God when we see it. Because quite frankly, we don't even recognize ourselves. We don't even recognize our own ancestors, our own blood, let alone a deity that's associated with a thunderstorm. Now, to the sister that preached this sermon, I say this out of respect. In your attempt to expose a quote unquote white supremacist lie, you in fact sound like that white supremacist colonizer that when he met our people, he said to himself, they don't know Jesus. These are heathens, uncivilized, in need of saving. They don't worship God. They worship demons. They aren't venerating and paying homage to their ancestors. They worship their ancestors. And we have to understand this too, y'all. When the colonizer said they don't know Jesus, that's loaded. That's not just simply saying they don't know a Christian deity. What he's truly is saying is that they do not have the intellect. They do not have the light of the knowledge. Why do you think that the Ku Klux Klan burned a cross or burned crosses in front of our people's front yards and stuff? That light, that burning cross, that was very symbolic. The Ku Klux Klan was just some redneck backwoods people in Mississippi that was just throwing on. They were they knew what they were doing. So yeah, that whole thing of Africans did not know Jesus, we have to understand that this is a very loaded thing. It means a lot of things. But I want to know what you guys are thinking. It's okay if you do not agree with me. It's okay that if you've taken issues with what I'm saying. I would love to hear your comments. You can like the video, unlike it if you don't. Feel free to subscribe to this channel and share the video, pass it around, and let me know what you guys are thinking. Let's start a dialogue and a conversation. So let me know. You all have a blessed evening.